So grab a coffee and pull up a chair. We are right here in the newsroom today.
Yeah.
And we're fresh off the press run.
Yeah, the ink is basically still wet.
Exactly. We are looking at the latest weekly edition of Addis Fortune. And if you look at the front page and then you just look out the window at the streets of Addis Ababa, there was this massive contradiction staring us right in the face.
It's the elephant in the room. Or rather, the elephant that isn't in the room, I guess.
Right. Because we're sitting here roughly 90 days away from a general election. And in any normal political cycle, historically, or even just looking at other countries, this is crunch time. This is when the noise level should be hitting the red zone.
You expect rallies, arguments in cafes, people handing out leaflets on the sidewalks.
Megaphones on pickup trucks, all of that. But looking at the reporting our team put together this week, the vibe is, well, strangely muted. That is the exact phrase the editorial team settled on.
Strangely muted.
Yeah, and so that is our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking the reporting from our own newsroom to figure out why there is this massive silence. Because when you stack these stories up, the election, the economy, the new regulations, you really see a theme emerging.
You do. It is a theme of policy versus reality.
Yeah.
We're seeing it on almost every page of the paper this week.
Yeah.
You have a government running on a very strict formal timetable. They were ticking boxes, passing directives, issuing fines. And then you have a population and the business sector that seems to be living in a completely different reality.
They are essentially operating on different systems.
That is a great way to put it. Whether it is the National Election Board moving chess pieces around, or the environmental agencies cracking down on the historic tanneries, or even the drug authority tightening the screws on local pharmacies.
Right.
The state is pushing hard for order, for formalization, for control. But the people on the ground, they're either struggling to survive that transition or they are just tuning out entirely.
So let's actually start with that silence, the election. It is supposed to be the main event of 2026. But our reporters are literally calling it background noise. Why is that? What did we find when we actually went out and asked people?
The data we gathered suggests a profound disconnect, specifically with the youth. And remember, the 18 to 30 demographic is the biggest block in the country. If you win them, you theoretically win the game.
Theoretically.
But the numbers from our survey are just brutal. 46.5% of them say they aren't planning to vote at all.
Wow.
But here's the statistic that really jumped out at me during the editorial meeting. 56.3% of them have never voted.
Wait, let's just pause on that for a second. Over half.
Over half.
So we aren't just talking about people sitting this specific election out because they don't like the current candidates. We are talking about a majority of young adults who have never participated in the civic process at all.
Exactly. It is not a boycott. It is an absence. It is just a void. And when our reporters dug into the individual stories behind those numbers, the reasoning wasn't necessarily angry. It was indifferent.
Take the story of Rahel Merka. She is 31 years old. She told our reporter she only realized the election was even happening a few days ago.
Which is wild, considering the state media is likely covering it wall to wall.
Right, but she isn't watching that. She is tuned into her own life. For Rahel, voting isn't some sacred civic duty. She used a phrase that I think perfectly captures the mood right now. She called it a logistical calculation.
A logistical calculation.
Yeah.
That is so cold. It sounds like she is deciding whether to go to the bank or the grocery store on a Tuesday.
It is entirely transactional. She is essentially saying, if the polling station is on my way to work and the line is short, maybe I will do it. If it is inconvenient, she is out.
And our survey really backs her up. Election information is one of the least followed topics on social media right now. People are scrolling right past the political updates to get to sports, entertainment, or just memes.
But I want to push back a little on the idea that it is just laziness or people being too busy. There's a much deeper layer here. Look at Samson Cassidy. His friends call him Simon.
Right, the 23-year-old.
Yes. He knows the election is happening. He actually plans to vote. But listening to his interview was almost sadder than listening to Rahel.
Samson is the archetype of the duty voter. He is doing it because he feels he should, kind of like flossing your teeth, not because he expects anything to fundamentally change.
He is a public health graduate, but he told us he won't work in his field because the pay is too low and the rural infrastructure is completely broken. He is looking for solutions to inflation, to the basic cost of living.
The bread and butter stuff, the things that actually determine if you can afford dinner tonight.
Exactly. But what is he hearing from the political campaigns? He says the communication is just jargon. He literally told our reporter, "It feels like communication between experts, not to me."
That is a massive failure of retail politics. If you make the voter feel like they need a degree in political science to understand your platform, you have already lost them.
Yeah.
And it creates the sense that politics is a game played by elites for elites. And there is another perspective here from Endale Kapiti. He's a political science grad, so he actually understands all that jargon. He knows exactly how the system is supposed to work, and he is deliberately boycotting.
So the political expert is opting out. That is very telling. What is his reasoning?
He argues the electoral ecosystem is too narrow. He's seeing opposition parties that only campaign in their specific ethnic or regional neighborhoods. They aren't even trying to win a national mandate.
Okay.
So, in his view, the incumbent, the Prosperity Party, is the only one with a real national footprint. He feels the result is predetermined not necessarily by fraud, but by the sheer lack of viable national-level competition.
So for him, the game is rigged simply by a lack of players showing up to the field.
Precisely. And this brings us to what I think is the most insightful part of this week's reporting. Samson, the 23-year-old we mentioned earlier, brought up a concept from his math class, a metaphor his teacher used, the asymptote.
Okay, I haven't done calculus in a very long time, so you're going to have to walk me and the listeners through this one.
It is actually a beautiful image. An asymptote describes a line that gets closer and closer to a curve. It approaches it constantly, but it never actually touches it.
Okay.
Samson says that is the exact relationship between politics and professionalism in Ethiopia right now.
That is actually quite profound for a 23-year-old.
It is brilliant. He is saying the government is moving on its track. They are holding elections, passing laws, doing all the official state things. And the people, the professionals, the workers, the graduates, they are moving on their track. They might be heading in the generally same direction, maybe, but they never intersect. They never touch.
So you just stay in your lane, you try to survive the inflation, you find a gig, and you let the politics happen in the background as this abstract noise that doesn't really affect your vector.
And the government is moving. That is the thing. It's not inactive. The National Election Board, the NEB, is organizing. But even their own organizational map admits that the country is fractured. They have had to categorize regions by security risk: green, yellow, and red.
This is that policy versus reality thing again. Policy says national election. Reality says color-coded security risk map.
Right. Green means safe to vote. Yellow is unstable or sensitive. Red means high risk, no elections. The chairperson, Meletwork Hailu, noted that most of Oromia is green, but the Amhara regional state. It has areas in all three categories, and Tigray is still pending safety updates.
So we're looking at a national election where significant chunks of the map might just be skipped.
Or delayed indefinitely, yes. If you live in a red zone, the election isn't just background noise, it simply doesn't exist. It reinforces that fragmentation. If the map itself is full of holes, how can the mandate be whole?
That is a very heavy question, and one the editorial board is certainly wrestling with. But I want to pivot here. We are talking about the government trying to clean up the political map. But there is another kind of cleaning up going on that is having a much more direct hit on the economy. We need to turn to the business section and talk about the leather industry.
This is a devastating story. If the election story is about apathy, this story is about active destruction.
The numbers in the report are just staggering. Leather used to be the second largest export earner for Ethiopia. We are talking about a strategic asset, a real pillar of the economy. We used to bring in $110 to $130 million a year in revenue from this sector alone.
It was a point of immense national pride. Quality Ethiopian leather.
And last year, it plummeted to just $30 million.
That is a total collapse. That is a 70 to 80% drop.
Now, usually when we see a drop like that in the business section, we assume there is a global market downturn or massive supply chain issues. But the reporting suggests this was largely self-inflicted.
It is a direct collision with the Addis Ababa Riverside project.
The beautification drive, right? The new parks.
Yes. The city administration has a vision. They want clean rivers, beautiful parks, a modern aesthetic for the capital. It is a noble goal. Who doesn't want a clean river in their city? But the reality is that the historic tanneries, the ones that actually built this industry over decades, are sitting right on those riverbanks.
And tanneries are not exactly known for being pristine. It is a very messy, chemical-heavy business.
It is a heavy industrial operation. So the government started cracking down. Take the Addis Ababa tannery. This place is deeply historical. It was founded by Armenians. It was the first one in the country. It has been there forever. They just got hit with a 300,000 birr fine for river pollution.
Which, playing devil's advocate here, if they are polluting the river, they should be fined. We can't just have factories dumping chemicals into the public water supply.
In a vacuum, absolutely. But look at the practical consequences of how this was handled. Because of the pressure, they slashed their staff from 460 people down to just 60. They are running on a bare-bones skeleton crew, and 6 other major tanneries have shut down completely.
But surely the government has a transition plan. They aren't just trying to delete one of their best industries.
The plan is relocation. The official policy is move everyone to Majo Leather City. That is about 75 kilometers away. The idea is to have a dedicated industrial zone with a state-of-the-art shared waste treatment plant.
That sounds completely logical. You centralize the mess, you treat it properly, and you free up the riverfront and the capital for the citizens.
It sounds perfect on paper. That is the policy. The reality is that Majo Leather City is currently barely more than a blueprint. It is 174 hectares of potential, not actual operation. Industry veterans like Ayla Masfa are screaming about this. You are forcing factories to close in Addis before the new zone is actually ready to take them.
It is a massive timing gap.
It is a death valley for these businesses. You cannot just pause a factory for 2 or 3 years while you build a park and wait for industrial zone to come online. You lose your international customers, you lose your skilled staff. And the waste, the physical waste of raw materials is unbelievable.
The report mentioned the raw hides.
Yes. Ethiopia has millions of livestock. We produced 41 million hides last year, but only 22 million actually reached the tanneries.
So almost half the raw material is just disappearing.
It is wasted, thrown away, or smuggled out of the country for absolute pennies because the tanneries aren't buying. They are closed or financially crippled. So you have a resource-rich country literally throwing away its gold because the processing capacity is being regulated out of existence in the name of beautification.
It really feels like the government is trying to skip a step. They want the post-industrial, clean, green, modern city.
Without doing the hard work of transitioning the industrial base that actually pays for that city, it is another asymptote. The vision of the city and the reality of the economy are not touching. They are running parallel. But the massive gap between them is exactly where all the jobs are falling through.
It is a definite pattern.
Yeah.
Clean up the election map, clean up the river. And here's the third one from this week's paper. Clean up the drug market.
This one is genuinely scary because it is not just about export money or lost votes. It is about physical human pain.
This is regarding the Ethiopian Food and Drug Authority, the EFDA. In December 2025, they dropped a massive new directive. What was the core goal there?
The goal was to stop the leakage of narcotics and psychotropic medicines into the illicit market. We are talking about opioids, sedatives, things like tramadol.
Which is a very legitimate problem. I mean, we know these things end up on the black market and cause harm.
Absolutely. The report explicitly mentions these drugs circulating in social gatherings, being sold openly on Telegram channels. It is a severe public health risk. So the EFDA went scorched earth. They tightened everything. Imports, storage protocols, prescription rules. They want strict accountability for every single pill.
But once again, we have this brutal collision with reality. The report tells the story of a 25-year-old tour guide. He has a legitimate medical prescription for tramadol for severe anxiety.
And because of the sudden crackdown, the supply just dried up overnight. The price on the street and even in the remaining pharmacies jumped from 25 birr to 70 birr. He is literally being priced out of his own prescribed medication.
There was also a detail in that report that I found really disturbing. It was about women using tramadol for menstrual cramps.
That was a fascinating and tragic detail. They mix it with soft drinks. The report strongly implies this is happening because they cannot get proper medical guidance or effective alternative pain relief. It is a desperate, informal measure for pain management, and now they are just being abruptly cut off.
But the part that really worried me was the reaction from the medical professionals themselves. The article used the phrase involuntary pharmaceutical assistance. That sounds like intense legal jargon. What does that actually mean for a patient?
It is a bureaucratic nightmare term. Basically, doctors and pharmacists are terrified right now. The new directive carries such strict penalties, audits, license suspensions, even criminal charges. Medical professionals are afraid of making a simple clerical error on a form.
So they are practicing defensive medicine to protect themselves.
They are practicing avoidance medicine. Dr. DeWitt Wondemigen raised a huge red flag about palliative care.
This is end-of-life care. Cancer patients, people in severe terminal pain.
Exactly. If hospitals are too afraid of the paperwork and the legal risks to even stock opioids, you are going to have patients dying in absolute agony. That is the ultimate human cost of a policy that looks only at control and completely ignores care.
It is the exact same story as the tanneries. The policy says zero tolerance for illicit diversion. The reality says terminal patients need pain relief today. And the sheer regulatory burden is crushing the legitimate users while the state tries to catch the bad actors.
And it is not just doctors or factory owners taking the hit. Even the lawyers are getting squeezed by this push for formalization.
I saw that on the legal page, the lawyers versus the taxman story. You'd think if anyone could easily navigate the state bureaucracy, it would be the lawyers.
You would think so. But they are currently in a pitched legal battle with the Ministry of Finance over VAT, the value-added tax.
Break this down for us.
Yeah.
Usually you only pay VAT if your business makes over a certain revenue threshold.
Right. There is always a threshold to protect small businesses. But the Ministry of Finance issued a notice saying all lawyers, regardless of their annual turnover, must register for VAT immediately.
Why? Does the government assume the legal sector is just secretly rolling in cash?
The government assumes the legal sector is vastly undertaxed. They are desperate for revenue because state coffers are running dry. But for a small, one-person legal practice in a rural area, the administrative burden of filing VAT paperwork every single month is huge. It might actually cost them more in accounting fees to comply than the tax they actually owe the government. So 89 lawyers sued to stop this.
And this is where the story gets legally very weird.
It gets completely absurd. 7 lawyers actually sued first. The High Court granted those 7 an injunction, basically saying, okay, you 7 do not have to register while we take the time to figure out if this new rule is even legal.
Okay, that makes sense. That is how injunctions work.
Then 89 more lawyers filed a separate suit saying, hey, the exact same logic applies to us, we want an injunction too. And the court looked at them and said no.
Wait, so if you were early to the courthouse, you're safe from the taxman. But if you were late, you have to pay and do the paperwork.
Exactly. The Ministry of Finance argued that if the court let everyone pause the rule just by filing a lawsuit, nobody would ever pay their taxes. They called it a deliberate delay tactic. So now you have a split reality in the legal profession based purely on who filed their paperwork faster.
But doesn't that create what the lawyers called irreparable harm? Once you force a small, independent lawyer into the complex VAT system, it is incredibly hard to undo that administrative mess, even if the court later decides the ministry's rule was actually illegal.
That is exactly their argument. It is heading to the Supreme Court now. But it perfectly highlights the government's mindset right now. Revenue first, fairness second. They are widening the tax net aggressively, and they really don't care if they catch the small fish who can't handle the mesh of the net.
So when we step back and look at the whole picture emerging from this week's Addis fortune, you have the election board zoning the country into safe and unsafe boxes, the city administration shutting down historical tanneries for a park that isn't finished, the FDA locking down essential pain meds, the Ministry of Finance dragging small-town lawyers into corporate VAT systems.
It is a picture of a state that is heavily flexing its muscles. It wants to be modern, regulated, formalized, and highly tax efficient. That is the policy side. It is a very coherent vision of a strong, capable state.
But the reality side is the user experience.
And the user experience is terrible right now. The young voter feels unheard and just ghosts the ballot box. The tannery owner is forced to fire his staff and close before he can move to the new industrial zone. The patient is in agony because the doctor is scared of a government audit form. The lawyer is drowning in monthly tax paperwork instead of practicing law.
It all goes right back to Samson's asymptote. The state is shooting upward towards this grand vision of a clean, orderly, formalized Ethiopia. And the people are moving horizontally. They're moving towards basic survival, finding informal solutions, or just checking out of the system completely.
And that is the true danger here. If those two lines never meet, you don't get a functioning democracy or a thriving economy. You get a formal shell of a system, a Potemkin village of regulations, and a population that has learned to live around the state rather than within it.
There was one last quote from Sampson, our disillusioned 23-year-old voter, that I think really nails this whole deep dive. He said, "Repetition becomes identity."
That stuck with me too. It is a haunting phrase.
If your experience with the state is repeatedly being ignored, or repeatedly having to find a workaround just to get your medicine, or repeatedly feeling like the system is working against your business, then disengagement doesn't just happen once. It becomes who you are.
It becomes your core civic identity. And that brings us right back to that 56% of youth who have never voted. If disengagement has become their identity, how do you even begin to reverse that? That is the real challenge facing the country in 2026. It is not just about holding an election. It is about convincing an entire generation that the lines can actually intersect, that the asymptote can finally be broken.
It is a mathematical problem with a very heavy human cost. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've talked about the state pushing people away with heavy regulation. But if the formal systems push everyone into the informal sector, what happens when that informal sector becomes more organized and reliable than the state itself? Does the asymptote eventually flip, where the state becomes the background noise to the reality of the streets? It is something to keep an eye on as we get closer to the polls.
It is certainly something we will be watching closely.
Thank you so much for joining us inside the newsroom for this deep dive into the pages of Addis Fortune. We will catch you on the next one.